Welcome everyone who's joining us today. Mahalo for being here with us. I hope you had a great summer. And now that summer's over, we wanted to be able to have a refresher for those who may not have gotten the information or those who may have gotten the information from our previous webinar at the end of last school year. And we're so excited today to be joined by U.S. Representative Jill Tokuda, and then our friends from the ACLU of Hawaiʻi. This is the Immigration Enforcement for Educators webinar. I just want to let you know that as webinar participants, you will not have to worry about your camera being on or your mic accidentally being on. We will not see nor hear you, so feel free to just relax. If you do have questions that you want to ask to us, we do have the ones that were submitted in advance, and so we'll try to get through those. Well, we will get through those. And then we also have the Q&A option at the bottom of your screen if you want to ask additional questions that we might be able to ask during the webinar. Please be careful in what you put into your questions. This is a recorded session, so everything that is said will be on video that we're going to be making available to all of our members through Member Matters and on YouTube. To the media, so please be careful. I am Osatui, the HSTA State President, and I'm so glad to be with you today. Joining me is my classmate from King Intermediate and Castle High School, the Honorable U.S. Representative Jill Tokuda. Jill, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Osa. Yes, we actually went to rival elementary schools. Osa was a Kapuna Hall boy. I went to Kaneohe L, but nonetheless, proud nights for sure. And just a big mahalo to all of you. Thank you, ACLU, for always partnering with us to provide us with the knowledge and the power to be able to really do what we've got to do right now in this moment of history that we are in. And I say this mahalo as not just a member of Congress, but as the mother of 2 public school students as well. And, I was walking through the halls of Castle just a few days ago, paying student dues, getting student IDs, doing the whole before school setup. And I couldn't help but think about the fact that, increasingly year after year, generation after generation, we've asked teachers to do so much more than just teach. Right? When people think, well, what is a teacher? A teacher teaches people how to read, they teach them math, they teach them critical thinking, science, civics. And yet we know over the generations and the years, you have had to also teach values. You have had to become surrogate mothers and fathers and aunties and uncles to children who don't have a stable home life, who struggle through many things and don't have anyone to turn to with critical questions, even about their own identity and who they are. And now, as we look forward ahead to this time that we're in so many ways, you are literally on the front lines witnessing a destruction of their rights, a taking of their rights, a threatening of who they are and who their families are. And so while we should never ask this of you to do this on behalf of our keiki, I just want to thank you for never stepping back and for always leaning in and leaning forward, because it is so critically important that our children especially understand that they have people who care about them. And we know Trump could care less about kids. Trump doesn't care about keiki. Well, hell, he don't care about Kapuna or anyone in between either. But he definitely doesn't care about keiki and making sure that they have access to everything they need, that they don't feel afraid to go to the doctor or the hospital in case ICE might take their parents, aren't afraid to walk home in a straight line from school because they don't want to be bait for their parents, or being afraid, and I've heard this when I was sitting in Kona, afraid to tell their own stories of their family, their history, how they came here, their dreams, because they're afraid it'll get traced back or used against people that they know and that they love. He does not care. He does not care about kids getting everything they deserve, every opportunity, every greatest equalizer, and I know you do. And so that's why these kinds of Know Your Rights seminars, these discussions are so important, so that we all understand our rights and are able to best support the children that we love, that we care for, that we teach. And I would just ask you this too, as you're out there on the front lines, please, secondary trauma is real. If you need help as you witness these things, as you deal with these things, please, there should never be any shame in making sure that as you deal with what are very stressful, unthinkable moments in our history right now, reach out for help. Talk to people that you know. HST has been a wonderful advocate. They've got resources there. We need to do better, quite frankly, even the Department of Education, providing both guidance and supports to our educators who are literally on the front line, the ones holding the hands, wiping away the tears. Reach out if you need help. And that is just something I want to make sure all of you know as we go out there. But just again, a big mahalo for what you do to ACLU, our partners, helping to make sure we have the understanding, the research we know. And know this, as you share the stories with me, we'll make sure those stories continue to be heard, because we cannot allow democracy to die in darkness. They need to hear the stories. They need to hear the atrocities that are happening right now so that we can make sure we put a stop to it. But again, big mahalo. Looking forward to the discussion, and to all the teachers, welcome back to school. And I hope you see each and every one of you in the classroom soon. Thank you. Back to you, Osa.
Mahalo, Representative Tokuda. Really appreciate that. We're so excited to have today from ACLU of Hawaii, our friends Emily Hills and Nathan Lee, who are going to guide us through this presentation. And so with that, Emily, I'll hand it over to you.
Hi, everybody. I'm very sorry. My dog just started barking. Give me like 1 second. Okay. Oh, good. Okay. My partner got up. Literally, as soon as you said my name, arf, 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 arf. Okay. Hi, I'm Emily Hills. I'm senior staff attorney here at the ACLU of Hawaii. And I'm here with Nathan Lee, who is our policy fellow. Together, we're going to be doing a presentation talking about the rights of anybody interacting with law enforcement, specifically immigration enforcement. So let me get my share screen started. Okay, Nathan, can I get a thumbs up? Is that working? We good? Okay. Okay. So I said we're from the ACLU of Hawaii. We are nonprofit, nonpartisan. We're a civil rights, civil liberties watchdog. We do a variety of things. We do litigation. That's the department that I'm in. We also do policy advocacy and lobbying. That's the department that Nathan is in. We do organizing, and we do public education and press, like this event today. So we have kind of a packed agenda that we wanted to be able to get through. We're going to start by talking about constitutional rights generally for anybody interacting with law enforcement, whether that's students or teachers, administrators. Talking a little bit about what's happening with immigration enforcement right now, including things that might have changed since we were doing this presentation last May. And then I'm going to walk us through some sort of hypotheticals about how to respond if immigration and custom enforcement comes to the school, tries to enter my classroom, wants to arrest a student, asks for information. We'll end by talking a little bit about other things that schools can do to protect families, and then rounding out with a Q&A. I have to give this, I'm a lawyer, I have to give a disclaimer. This presentation is for information purposes. We're not giving out legal advice. We can't give out legal advice because we don't know all of you and your situations. So it's important to always consult with a lawyer, especially if you get arrested, if you're in removal proceedings, to tell people who do get arrested or in removal proceedings that they need to talk to lawyers. And then the other caveat I have is, well, we're going to be talking about what's happening in immigration enforcement right now. As I think we've all seen over the last, 6 months, 7 months, that in this administration, policies and practices are changing very, very quickly. So what's true today may end up changing tomorrow. We're doing our best to stay up to date, but this could become outdated if things change drastically. So with those disclaimers, I'm going to turn it over to Nathan to talk about constitutional rights.
Okay, great. Thanks, Emily. So we're going to give a brief overview of what constitutional rights people, including undocumented individuals, but more generally, everybody who is within the United States, what rights they have. And these will be important because they'll play into the rest of the presentation and the kind of information we're able to provide. And so generally, all people, regardless of their immigration status, have a kind of key set of rights. These include the right to remain silent, which means you don't have to answer questions or talk to law enforcement when they ask you questions. This also includes the right to be free from unreasonable searches. So this could look like, not allowing officers, including ICE officers, to enter private spaces without a warrant or your consent. Protections against physical searches of people's bodies, and also searches of closed spaces, so lockers, backpacks, phones, without a warrant or consent. And I know there are some exceptions to the warrant requirement in certain situations, but for the most part, there is this right to be free from unreasonable searches. Additionally, and related, there's a right to be free from unreasonable seizure. So this means that individuals cannot be arrested without probable cause, and can't be stopped without reasonable suspicion. And of course, race and ethnicity do not count as reasonable suspicion to be stopped by law enforcement officers. And finally, and what I think will be important in terms of what you all can do and what citizens can do is the free speech rights that we all enjoy. And that includes the right to criticize government. It also includes the right to record law enforcement activities in the public in order to hold them accountable, in order to express how you feel about law enforcement, and to hold to increase government transparency. So related to this, it's also important to keep in mind that while these rights exist, we are seeing increasingly that they're not being honored by law enforcement or by ICE officers specifically. And so, there's no guarantee that unconstitutional violations of individuals might happen in the moment. Even if, say, an officer does not show a warrant, they might still proceed to engage in a search of a private place. In these cases, it's important to thoroughly document the kind of conduct that's being, inflicted upon individuals, so that constitutional rights that are being violated can be enforced after the fact. And so we want to be careful in general not to escalate situations where rights are being violated, but instead to document and to lay the groundwork for enforcing these rights later down the road. Given that kind of primer, I'm going to go over briefly what's happening with immigration enforcement right now. So there's a number of things happening. So here in Hawaii, we're seeing a drastic increase in arrests related to immigration by ICE in Hawaii. You can see since the inauguration of the current president, a huge significant spike in arrest numbers. These are also likely under-inclusive. Also, more broadly, I think it's important to note that across the country, we're seeing many incidents of school-related activity. These are maybe not happening in Hawaii, but for example, in North Carolina, ICE was at school drop-off lines, and the local PTA at that school rallied to kind of pressure ICE to stay out of those areas. In Portland, Oregon, a father who was picking up his kid from a Montessori school in a very liberal area was actually arrested while doing drop-off in the morning. And he was married to a citizen. He's a chiropractor from Iran, and was in the process of trying to get his status adjusted as a lawful permanent resident because of his marriage to a U.S. citizen. And so just off the bat, Hawaii is no exception, and places like Portland, Oregon are no exception to the kind of enforcement of immigration that is being accompanied by tactics of fear and of brute force, and also of targeting people who pose no risk to other people living in the United States. Lastly, we're seeing an increase of issues related to language access and other kind of conditions at the Federal Detention Center in Honolulu. And one of the policies that's contributing to these factors is that there has been policies that bond will not be given to undocumented immigrants who are in detention. And so this means that individuals who might be able to have immigration proceedings, but be at home, be with family, be in community, have access to their lawyer, are being detained and not being given the opportunity to be released on bond. This might affect children whose parents are being held at the Federal Detention Center. especially children perhaps in mixed status households who might have one parent who is watching them, but the other parent might be held indefinitely. And so this is a new development that's of concern. Additionally, because the Federal Detention Center here in Hawaii cannot detain children, we are also seeing some cases where children, along with their parents, are being detained and sent to the mainland and to facilities on the continent. And so that's another issue of children being sent very far from what is their home. Lastly, another update is that COFA migrants are being sent to Guantanamo. We haven't seen this here in Hawaii, although there have been restrictions on travel into Honolulu from COFA nations, but this is another concern because of the population here in Hawaii. In addition, one thing that we have seen is targeting of unaccompanied children and related using their information to locate family members who are caring for them. We have seen an example of a school resource officer here in Hawaii cooperating with ICE and bringing an individual student from their school to ICE directly after school. And so although we haven't seen immigration enforcement en masse at schools, this is something that's happening on the continent and also is happening to some degree here in Hawaii. And so I think it's important to stay on our toes, to pay attention to our rights, to assert them, and also to not have a blind eye or to think that these kinds of enforcement actions can't happen here in Hawaii. And so I'm going to turn it over back to Emily to kind of discuss what to do in a situation where ICE shows up at school. You're muted, Emily.
Sorry, thank you. Well, Nathan's right that there's not been widespread immigration enforcement at schools in Hawaii yet. That is something that's happening on the mainland. I think it's a really good idea that we be prepared for that to start happening. I did want to have a caveat here. I'm saying what to do if ICE comes to your school. We're using ICE broadly as immigration and customs enforcement. Here in Hawaii, we're also seeing action by HSI or Homeland Security Investigations. So it might not be an ICE agent specifically. I'm really just talking about interactions with law enforcement officers who are enforcing immigration law. So in the questions that we kind of got in advance, we saw a lot of people asking variations of, can I legally refuse to let ICE enter my classroom? So the fast answer is really not helpful because it depends. So we're going to kind of walk through the different scenarios that might be coming up, what things you should be kind of looking out for, keeping in mind, and then what to do about them. I think the first thing that I kind of wanted to flag is if immigration enforcement comes to your school, there are DOE, Department of Education procedures that you can follow. I'm referring back to this May 18th, 2025 guidance. It was sent initially to complex area superintendents, principals, and vice principals, but it really would apply to anybody working for the Department of Education. It also includes a very helpful flowchart that I'm actually going to screenshot in a little bit that you can kind of look through, and it has kind of a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about actually kind of laid out. I will say we looked at it saying, do we need to send DOE a letter saying this is what the guidance that you should be giving? And we kind of were like, I think this guidance is pretty good. It's not perfect, but it really does give you good steps to follow. I will note a lot of times the guidance is instructing principals and vice principals to contact the complex area superintendents. That could mean for teachers that you would be contacting the VP or the principal, depending on your school policies. And then I kind of have to have this little caveat of like, we will be talking about where you might be able to resist that doesn't quite fall into this guidance. We can't speak to the employment consequences if you're not going to be following DOE procedures. But as I said, the DOE did provide this flow chart that kind of shows what steps to take the minute you kind of come into contact with an immigration enforcement officer, or really any law enforcement officer who wants access to the school or access to information. So step one is to ask for identification and why they are there. There's usually two kind of main reasons why immigration enforcement would be at the school. Either they are looking for somebody in particular, to arrest a student, to look for a student, or they're there to get information. Ideally, information about a family, family members, parents' names, place of birth, things like that. If they want information, you need to ask for a subpoena, and I'm going to talk about that next. If they want to enter the school or a classroom, then you ask for a warrant. The really simple rule is if there's no supporting documents, there should be no compliance. The response would be, I'm not allowed to let you in. I'm not allowed to give you that information. You need to talk to, and you can kind of bounce it up the chain of the complex area superintendent, or you need to come back with the documents because I'm not allowed. And you can say, my employer, DOE, has told me I'm not allowed to give you that, or I'm not allowed to let you in. So let's break these down a little bit further. If immigration wants information, that means, a name, birth date, citizenship, information about a student, you have to ask for a subpoena. There's two different kinds of subpoenas, but actually DOE advice for both is the same. It's to notify the complex area superintendent and await further instructions. And that's because all subpoenas, even a judicial subpoena, needs to be reviewed by a lawyer. And DOE could challenge a judicial subpoena signed by a judge. So even if it is signed by a judge, in this context, if they want information, you just need to kind of send it up the chain. You should take the subpoena if they are saying, here's the subpoena. DOE is going to need to review that. So take the subpoena, make a copy, make sure that you are able to give that documentation to your superiors. And then it's important to note subpoenas have a time frame for compliance. When you're talking about a subpoena for information, they don't require immediate compliance. It's not going to be, and I'm saying this in case someone tries to tell you otherwise, they say this subpoena gives me the right to get this child's name and all of the information about their family members and the emergency contacts and their addresses and their citizenship status, etc. That subpoena, it needs to be reviewed by a lawyer. It doesn't require immediate compliance. There is time for the Department of Education to review it. I also wanted to flag, right, that federal law and the Hawaii Constitution protect students' privacy. So there's, the state is not allowed to disclose personally identifiable information. And I kind of included a list, right, of name, social security number, race, country of citizenship, address, date of birth. And then there are specific federal rules for notifying people before obeying a subpoena. So that's why I said on that last slide, a subpoena for information is not going to require specific, like immediate compliance, because there are these rules for notifying. That's why all of these any request for information is going to need to be reviewed by somebody else. Okay, so let's say on the flip side, they're not asking for information. Let's say immigration wants to enter the school or enter a classroom, because same rules are going to apply to a specific classroom, to look for somebody or to arrest somebody. First step is to ask for a warrant, and then I say and document. So document what is happening. So there's no obligation to comply with immigration absent a judicial warrant. That's because immigration authorities, just like all law enforcement authorities, don't have the right to enter places that are not public. Department of Education guidance is to document the activity if they persist in trying to enter a space that you believe they're not allowed to enter, to document that rather than physically getting in the way. And then Nathan is going to talk about this a little bit later, but it is legal to film immigration authorities regardless of immigration status. Even if you're told to stop recording, you can continue to record as long as you don't interfere. So let's kind of go back. So ask for a warrant, and then Nathan's going to talk about documentation.
Emily,
If they want, yeah.
before you continue, can I ask that you stop share
Yep.
and share? There's some glitching going on in your presentation at the moment.
Oh,
So
sure.
stop share and reshare. That would be
Okay.
great.
Let's see. I'm going to present my PowerPoint and see if that helps.
There we
Okay,
go.
does that look okay? Okay. Does it still look funny?
That's good.
I'm so sorry about that. Okay, so let's say they want to enter to come look for somebody or to arrest somebody. The first step is asking for a warrant signed by a judge. If they say, oh, I do have a warrant, then you ask to see it. You do have the right to see that before allowing them to enter a private space. And then if they show you a document, right, the first question is to say, is it actually a judicial warrant? This has been a problem in the past where immigration authorities have said they do have a warrant, they have a judicial warrant, and it was not a judicial warrant. So that's why we cover this. A judicial warrant is issued by a court, signed by a judge, and I caveat is this is a judge who's like a federal judge appointed under Section 3 of the Constitution, not an administrative immigration judge. And then it will say the address and the names of the person that they're looking for, the person that they want to arrest. And it gives a specific time frame for that warrant to be executed. An immigration warrant, I think broadly speaking, doesn't have all of that. It's usually issued by the Department of Homeland Security. So you can look for a DHS seal, a label, or a form number. It would be signed by an immigration officer or an immigration judge. And the authority to issue it, if that's listed on the paperwork, it would be coming from immigration law, not from the court's kind of Article 3 powers. So these are kind of examples of the different kinds of warrants. I think the key is here on the left, the judicial warrant. It's going to say, you know, from the district court. There's going to be a caption at the top. It's going to have a date on it. It's going to be assigned, and it's going to say that it's signed by a judge. And that would be U.S. magistrate judge or a U.S. district court judge, as opposed to an immigration official. And in the school context, it's really important to say, does the warrant specifically identify the school if they're asking to search within the school? It's not enough to just have a warrant saying we're allowed to arrest this person. If they want to enter a private space, it needs to have the school listed on it. If there is a valid judicial warrant, then compliance is required. If you're concerned about the warrant, if you think maybe this is valid, but it doesn't list the school or something like that, the DOE has directed people to contact the AG's office for immediate assistance. This is the number that they gave in that initial guidance. But if the AG's office is saying, you know, this is a valid warrant, it says they're allowed to enter the school, then they have to be allowed to enter the school. Guidance is to try to notify the complex area superintendent before letting them into the school, if that's safe, if that's possible. And then, of course, as we keep saying, document the law enforcement action. If there isn't a judicial warrant, so it's either an administrative, it's an immigration warrant, or it's a judicial warrant that isn't valid, so it doesn't specifically identify the school, or there's a time frame listed, but the date that they're there is outside of that time frame, then you don't have to let them into the school. And in fact, you shouldn't let them into the school or your classroom. Instead, notify the complex area superintendent, wait for further instructions. That document should be reviewed by a lawyer, probably somebody in the Attorney General's office. And so you can take copies of it, you can take pictures of it, but don't let them into the school. There are other steps that you should take instead. And kind of the last scenario is if immigration enforcement is demanding immediate access without a warrant. And when Nathan was talking about those rights to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures, there are these exceptions for emergencies. It's hard, personally for me, it's hard to imagine what kind of an emergency would justify entering a school to say arrest a student, but it's possible, I suppose. In that case, if they say you have to let us in, it's an emergency, or you have to let us in, it's exigent circumstances, that's kind of the legal term. You want to ask open-ended questions, so who, what, when, where, why, to try to figure out why they think this is an emergency. Don't say, is this an emergency? Because the chances are they're going to say yes. So instead determine, why this is an emergency. If they don't provide kind of a clear, compelling reason why this situation cannot wait for them to go get a warrant from the court, then you tell them that you need to consult with your supervisors. And if DOE guidance is if the officer is not allowing that, you should comply, but immediately alert kind of all of your supervisors that this is happening and there's not a warrant and they're entering the school anyways, and you told them they couldn't enter and they did so. Don't consent, because consent is another exception, right? If they say, I want to come in, and you say, okay, that could be consent, and then maybe they wouldn't need a warrant. But if you say, I don't consent to your entry, and they enter anyways, you kind of want to run it up the chain. There are situations where I think we got some questions about like barricading classrooms and stuff. I think the concern would be that resisting in this circumstance could escalate the situation. It could cause somebody to get kind of other criminal charges, or to be accused of harboring or obstruction, right? It could just make the situation worse. I think that's why the DOE instructions are to comply, but immediately alert kind of everybody that this is happening. And then the other really important part is to document. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Nathan to talk about kind of how you do that.
Great, thanks. I also want to encourage you all to submit questions to the Q&A through the function at the bottom, because we'll have some time for that at the end of the presentation. And thank you to those people who already submitted questions. So as we've been saying, what's really important when ICE is present on campus or violating rights that you should have is documenting their behavior. So, for example, if ICE is refusing to identify themselves or show a warrant, trying to record their behavior, take photos, both of the behavior and the actions of ICE agents, but also, taking photos or copies of documents that ICE agents show you or show the school. As Emily mentioned, it's important to do this without interfering or resisting in what ICE is doing, not shouting or escalating, or make yourself into a recorder of information rather than a source of conflict. And this will keep you and your family safe, but also, again, preserve information about what happened so that, those constitutional rights that have been violated or may have been violated can be, vindicated in the future. And then lastly, after ICE agents leave, document damages that have happened and try to write down your recollections of what happened immediately. So this right to record, to document ICE officers, other law enforcement officers is protected by the First Amendment and also by First Amendment law here in Hawaii. And so when officers are engaged in official duties in public places, which could include parts of schools, you have this right, and those have been established by the courts, both national and statewide. There are some limitations on this right. So again, the recording should be in a public space, somewhere where you have a right to be, and also you can't materially interfere with law enforcement operations. And so this is a very vague term. We're going to give some kind of tips on the next slide on what this looks like. But generally, like recording what's happening rather than trying to be a part of it or trying to stop ICE with physically from doing what they're doing is probably advisable. And so yeah, there are some restrictions in the law on the First Amendment right to record. So keep those in mind. And now we'll kind of go over some of the tips on what that looks like. So generally, you probably your best bet to not be interfering with an action is to observe from a safe distance, to be open about the fact that you're recording, not physically interfering with police, and then again, being very purposeful and calm about the fact that you are engaging in your First Amendment right to record, that you're not trying to escalate, but you're trying to document what is happening, and then complying with law enforcement orders as they come. Additionally, while you are recording or taking photographs, don't narrate or give any other information about the individuals who are the target of the action. Instead, let the video speak for itself and focus on just documenting the conduct that's happening. In addition, you might want to use a passcode lock on your phone to protect the recording, not a fingerprint or face ID locking system. And then afterwards, you want to be careful of preserving the video or photographs that you took, and then be strategic about posting this on social media. And so finally, we're going to kind of look at what other things schools can do to protect families. So I'm going to turn it back to Emily, but again, yeah, please send us those questions and answers, and we'll try to get our answers to you at the end.
Thanks, Nathan. I just wanted to flag too, when we say be strategic, I realized we could have been maybe more specific. It's because sometimes releasing on social media right away is not the most effective strategy for the person who has been detained. So it's a good idea to talk to them or their family or maybe their attorneys about whether and when to post that rather than immediately uploading. There's also concerns that sometimes posting videos like this that show a particular person being arrested, it could lead to retaliation or something like that. So just be cautious before posting publicly. So what else can schools do to protect families? Let's see. What's happening right now that we're seeing is somebody gets arrested. This is what's happening in Hawaii. A guardian parent, an auntie who has custody gets arrested, and then the school feels like there's no choice but to call child welfare services. Child welfare services then calls the police because they don't have authority to take children into custody without a court order. They have to call the police. And then it seems like the police are calling immigration enforcement. As Nathan had said, these steps get bypassed in enforcement actions on the mainland, but this seems to be what's happened here in Hawaii. And so I think one question is there anything that we can do about kind of this second step of the school calling child welfare services if it's not absolutely necessary? So some tips we had, and I have a huge asterisk here, right? I'm talking if the reason for calling child welfare services is the lack of a caregiver. I'm not talking about if there's a child being abused, if you're concerned that a child is being abused. I'm saying if the only reason to call child welfare services is because there's no caregiver, is there something else that we could do? So one tip is to, in advance at the start of the school year, making sure that each child has at least 2 emergency contacts who are authorized for pickup other than parents. Make sure that that contact information for them is up to date. And you can have a conversation with the parents about, are these contacts who all live in the same home? Are these contacts who might would be at risk of everybody being swept up in an enforcement action if, say, the house is raided, or maybe people could be spread out. Maybe somebody could be a lawful permanent resident at less of a risk, or a citizen, so that there is a safe custodian for the school to call to pick up a child rather than having to call CWI. Another option that schools can certainly tell families about, it's not really something that school can do, but it would be to prepare a power of an attorney or a guardianship in advance so that there are custody arrangements that have already been made. Now, it would be really important for the families to notify the schools about those arrangements in advance. We did hear about a situation that happened on the Big Island where there was, I think, a 17-year-old who was picked up. It doesn't sound like it happened at school, though we're actually not totally sure. But there were alternate custody options. The problem was the student had gotten picked up first, and it doesn't sound like once those were kind of presented to immigration enforcement that those were sufficient. So it would be important to have those and make sure that the people who, like school administrators who would be releasing the students, know that these documents exist. And so finally, I wanted to kind of conclude with some additional resources. For anybody who needs immigration assistance, there is a hotline for people who are in detention. There are also a number of nonprofits here in Hawaii that do immigration assistance. So the Legal Clinic, Roots Reborn on Maui, and the Legal Aid Society of Hawaii. For a power of attorney or guardianships, Legal Aid of Hawaii will do those. They can also refer out, so that would kind of be the main referral for that one. And then for civil rights concerns, of course, I have to give a plug to the ACLU. We are kind of the main, I think, civil rights watchdog here in Hawaii. There is this red card document that I wanted to flag because I heard that HSTA is helping teachers order those. So that's a really great option for helping educate students, parents, even other teachers about constitutional rights in the immigration context. And then for ACLU information, on our website, we do have some other trainings. One is a more kind of detailed overview outside of the school context specifically, but talking about the specific constitutional rights that apply in the immigration context. And then we also have one that goes into more detail about free speech rights, the rights of freedom of association, and how that applies in immigration. And then finally, if you do need civil legal assistance, please, you can visit our website. You can fill out a form for legal assistance. And with that, I think we're on to our questions slide. So I'm going to hand it back to Osa.
Emily and Nathan, thank you so very much. We appreciate everything that you shared so far. We appreciate those who are putting questions in. Please use the Q&A feature versus the chat. But we will answer questions that have come in, or we will put the questions out there that have come into the chat. I'll say the first one was the one that was trying to hold on. If there is immigration enforcement on my campus, is there someone I can call at that moment? So Nathan?
Yeah, as you mentioned, I think following the DOE guidance and calling the complex area superintendent or perhaps your principal or vice principal based on school policy is the best option. And as Emily mentioned, there's also a hotline to the Attorney General's office, which you might want to use. But also, I want to note that this will be recorded and shared, and so you can go back and look at any of the other resources and hotline numbers for later on if somebody or a student is placed into detention.
Yeah, I'll say that if something's happening right then and there, you should notify your administrators first and foremost. Let them handle the situation, let them take care of it. Just like you wouldn't allow any stranger on campus to just suddenly, interact with your students, same thing. Don't allow them. Make sure that they have to check in with the office. Ask them, have you checked in with the front office? Are you authorized to be on campus here? And things of that nature. I will say sometimes this comes across as, oh, I don't have to worry about this. This is my administrator's responsibility. We do have some schools that are small enough where sometimes all the administrators are off campus, and we have what's called the TIC, the teacher in charge. And then the teacher in charge may just at that moment may find themselves in this situation. So from what you could see on the slides, a lot of them says contact the CAS right away. Or even, when your principal's off campus or your administrators are off campus, you should make sure that you have contacts information for those people so that you can reach out to them right away. So thank you for that. Let's see. Some of the other questions that have either come in or were shared in advance. So we answered that. Does the school have any legal responsibility to provide distance learning options for continuity of education? I will say that if you search for Haido distance learning, there is a 9 through 12 option. I don't know that there is a quote unquote legal responsibility to provide a distance learning option for students. So it is what it is. A lot of questions came in that were the same, and although it was answered in the presentation, I'm going to just ask one similar question of the same so that we can just get reiterated. Let's see. I mean, there was like many of them. What do you do if ICE shows up at your class looking for a student? Since our campus is open to the public on all sides and has a public road running through the middle of it, it is plausible that this situation could occur. What can an individual teacher do if ICE shows up at the classroom door?
So I can take that one. I mean, I think I would be very surprised if an immigration agent knew which classroom to go to. I think they probably would be starting at kind of the main office to ask where to find a student. But if this does happen, right, your classroom is not a public space. The same protections that we were talking about applying to the school generally, do still apply. And so you would kind of go through the steps of asking for identification, asking what they're there for. They tell you they're there because they want to arrest one of your students. You say, okay, do you have a warrant? And may I see it? And then they have to show you what the paperwork is. And if they don't show you what the paperwork is, then you say, I'm not allowed to let you in. I have, and that's where you can lean on your superiors too, right? I can refer this to the administrators. I have to call the area superintendent, but I'm not personally allowed to let you in. If they push past you, if they insist on coming in, I think the current advice is to simply document that, because otherwise you could be at risk for getting arrested for obstruction or something like that. But kind of following those steps of asking for their information, finding the warrant, and then making sure that you're notifying all of the other administrators at your school.
Is there a pamphlet that schools are able to give to parents in their language to inform them of the steps if their child is removed?
I am not personally aware of anything like that. I would be a little concerned because I think the situation would vary significantly depending on why a child was removed or detained. I can say that we're seeing we're not seeing children being detained without their parents, for better or worse. So it seems unlikely that a school would be facing a situation where a child was picked up and the parents had no idea.
We have some teachers who are worried about themselves, and so I'll answer this one about our school refuses to provide an online daily sign-in. They were able to do this during COVID, but now they refuse to. This forces teachers to go into the front office, a public place where ICE agents can go in. Many of our teachers are J-1 visa holders or mere green card holders. As I'm not an American citizen, I resent having to go into a public place without cause so that an ICE agent can pounce on me. What can the union do to address this? Unfortunately, you do have to go into the main office to check your box every day because there may be important documents and paperwork that you have to provide to your students. And so we're definitely working on the sign-in portion with the department, but that doesn't preclude you from having to go into the main office. And it's understandable that there is concern that you could be picked up any place and anywhere. So I don't know that there's any other answer we can provide with regards to that.
It's possible that not all parts of the main office are public. Right? Schools could put up signs right behind the main desk if that's where the mailboxes are. That's not public. If teachers are able to enter from the back or things like that, there might be some flexibility, but that's just a suggestion. It would depend on the layout.
Yeah, some schools are locked down and you have to get in. Some the main office, there's no way other than the front doors. So. I do have, if Representative Tokuda is on, I have a question that came in that perhaps she might want to answer. So Rep. Tokuda, one of the questions that came in is, how do I answer students who ask if it's safe to come to school?
Oh, it's really sad that we have to hesitate a bit on that. But I would say, we need to say yes, right? I have to believe that from teachers to administrators to all of our school personnel, everyone is committed to the safety of our children. And there are very few safe places in this world these days. School needs to be one of them, whether they're afraid of immigration informants, officers or guns or everything else. We as adults that care for them and that teach them have to do everything we can to keep them safe. So while it seems that the challenges are against us, I think the answer has to be yes, school is a safe place. And that's why we do things like this, to make sure that they can feel safe and that they are safe in places like our school. That's why I signed and pushed legislation to restore those sensitive, safe places that this administration seems to think it's their right to just intrude in, whether it's a school or a church or a hospital. we have to make sure that students have a safe place to just be able to be themselves. So thank you to the teachers that are helping to keep it a safe place.
Yeah. And I'll also add to that that we've seen Board of Education Chair Takumi also put out very publicly on Civil Beat how schools should be safe places for students and adults, and they back that up 100%. So thank you so very much. There was mention, Emily, about red cards. If teachers would like red cards, you can write to HSTA, use the contact us option on our website, or just talk to one of our staff members, and we absolutely can get you red cards which talk about your rights, and we have them in various languages as well. If you want to check your member matters email that came last week Friday, and we'll put it again this week Friday, there is a link for you to put in a request for red cards in various languages as well. So feel free, we're glad to provide those as well. I do see one other question that's come into the chat. So if one of you folks, I'll read it. Families are at risk of being punished with truancy court if they do not feel they can send their children to school safely. What protections are there for families so they are not penalized? Will this lead to additional legal issues like educational neglect? What could we share with families so they are not further victimized?
That's a really hard question. I think the first step, and this is not the sharing with family step, this is the kind of information gathering step, would be to talk to administrators at the school or talk to people at DOE for kind of what the policies are around when truancy cases get filed. I have a little bit of experience with this, but not enough that I would feel authoritative in saying this. My understanding is that schools have a fair amount of discretion in terms of when they decide to file and kind of what criteria they're looking at before they file. So if a student is, say, sending in all of their schoolwork, but not coming in during the day, there might be some flexibility there before a truancy petition would be filed. So I think that's the first step, is to kind of check on that and then be able to tell the families, here's kind of the parameters for, what you're allowed to do or when you're allowed to withhold students versus when you have to send them to school.
And if a teacher was hosting a small family gathering for newcomer families, would they be able to get someone from ACLU to come speak virtually to that gathering?
I can't promise. It would depend on the scheduling and our bandwidth at the time, but you are more than welcome to reach out. I can put my email. I think I can chat to everybody, so I can put my email in the chat if anybody. Can I chat to everybody? I thought I could.
Verbally announce it.
So it's E for Emily, my last name Hills, HILLS, at ACLUHawaiʻi.org.
Details at ACLUHawaiʻi.org. There we go.
Thank you.
All right. And I don't see any further questions, but there is a comment that, thanking everyone for putting this together. Thank you to Representative Tokuda for everything that you're doing in DC. I reiterate that as well. Mahalo to you, Rep. Tokuda. It is a tough fight. You win some, you lose some, but I know you're fighting no matter what. So I don't see any further questions. So do you have any last words that you want to share?
Thank you, Osa. Just again, want a big mahalo to ACLU for being such an amazing partner, providing what is oftentimes difficult, technical, complicated advice, but being there for all of our teachers, HSTA as well. Thank you for being that supportive ohana we all need right now. And to our teachers listening now, or those who might listen a little bit later, please know that you are not alone. I know sometimes I can just imagine being in the front of that classroom is daunting enough at times. I only have 2 sons. I can't imagine a whole classroom of kids, timesing that by 6 or 7 or how many periods you have to teach. But to now face a lot of the challenges that you do, whether it happens or not, that anticipation can be enough to be very, very stressful. So please, I want you to know you have allies and friends, HSTA, ACLU, in Congress, members like myself. We stand with you through all of this to make sure kids don't have to question if school is a safe place, to make them feel that they are supported. And please know, again, just my simple big mahalo to you all, but know that we are here 100% standing side by side, all of you. And so just good luck. Thank you for what you do for our keiki next week when all the kids go back to school, including my two sons. Sending you a lot of love and aloha. So mahalo, everyone.
Nathan, Emily, do you have any last words you want to leave with us?
You know, I think I really appreciated what Representative Tokuda said, and that schools should be a safe place. And I think we all want schools to be a safe place. And certainly I can speak for the ACLU Hawaiʻi and say that we are doing everything we can to make that a reality. And if you think that that's not the case, please do reach out because we are interested in getting involved.
Yeah, and you know, I want to thank teachers who have gone above and beyond. We've heard at the end of last school year, teachers who are doing everything in their power to try and support people who find themselves in these situations. And it's sad that we've come to this, but teachers will do everything in their power to try and make a safe space for our students. Just know that this is going to be recorded.
I also want to address those one extra question that came in.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
So the question is, any advice if ICE is nearby but outside of school? So this is the most common thing that we've been seeing. And so I think the kind of advice or information provided by DOE, obviously you should follow, but also the information that Emily provided about navigating pickup and drop off, power of attorney, alternate individuals who might be able to pick up students could be useful information to have. And so conveying that to students or their parents who might have some of those concerns. Yeah, I think based on what we're seeing, that might be the best approach. And again, we haven't seen as much enforcement here, even outside schools in Hawaii. So just keeping that in mind and having families who are concerned consider that as an option ahead of time could be wise.
Yeah, and as I was talking about, oh, go ahead, Emily.
Oh, so I was to say, I can add that I know there are some after school programs where the policy is to, if they see law enforcement, like kind of outside the school, whether it's immigration or police or whatnot, to bring the students inside so that they don't witness anything concerning, but also so that the school can then make decisions about how to act while the students are inside and not out.
Thank you. Yeah, and as I was saying about teachers going above and beyond, I've heard stories of teachers actually doing power of attorney for their students so that they can try and, they're just doing whatever avenue was possible. And we're not recommending that teachers do that. I'm just saying that that's, stories that have bubbled up as to what teachers are trying to do to keep their students safe. This is recorded and will be available this evening on HSTA's YouTube channel. It will also be in Friday's Member Matters, so our email blast that goes out to all of our teachers, and we'll have the links to the things, the guidance document again that the DOE put out earlier this calendar year, and if you want to get cards, please check your Member Matters. We have the links there, or just give us a call and we'll get those to you. It is my honor to be here tonight with Nathan, Emily, and Representative Tokuda. Thank you so very, very much. I do see one more. Oh, just someone else saying mahalo for everything. So with that, I wish all of you a great school year without any immigration enforcement taking place on your campuses. Let's all, that'll be my Christmas wish in July. And so with that, mahalo for everyone joining us tonight. Take care. Have a good evening.
Thank you.